Hello YouTubers. This is the 7th video where we start talking about the next principle in the Software Engineering Manifesto, which is developers first software. Software that was built with the intention and the mindset that it's going to be maintained by other developers. It's developer friendly. It's developer friendly software. And we have touched base on some of these principles in the past. You know, how your software should be intuitive, should be plug and play, should just work like an appliance. But one of the other things that I've seen a lot of people choose to oversee when it comes to building software is documentation. Um, there are many schools of thought out there when it comes to documenting your software. Some people say a good code does not need any documentation, right? But that doesn't really go very well when it comes to complex methods or methods that do a lot of work that may require you to summarize what the method is doing. So the developers are coming in to maintain your method. They could just read the documentation and know what the purpose is for writing that method. So, which brings us to another thing around documentation. You cannot complain that other developers are taking your software into a different direction as an engineer. So let's say you came into this startup or an enterprise or even your own project, and now you're bringing in a bunch of other developers with you to work with you on the same project. You cannot blame these people for taking your software into a different direction if you didn't document your software well enough for them to know what pattern and what methods, what documentation they need to do. A lot of people rely on what we call tribal knowledge, like he said, she said, that's how you should do things. That's not very engineered way to build things. If you, as a real engineer, you need to document your code. You need to always think about this bus factor. The bus factor is some like Google introduced that something early in 2008 maybe, the bus factor is basically, if a developer is writing this really, really cool code and then he walked out of his building and then he got hit by a bus. Now, all that knowledge is gone. Nobody knows how this code works. It's completely mysterious. So document your code. And when we talk about code documentation, there are two things we want to talk about. There is what the code is doing, like a summary of what the function is doing, and there is why the code is written. What's the purpose of this function? So there's what is it doing? Like, for instance, this function is making a call to an external API to bring in, customer information, for instance, right? All right, we got the what, we got the how. Now, what is the purpose? The why. So the why here is important to help people put together these pieces of puzzle to know what the end goal is, right? And I've seen a lot of documentation where people type in like the what is the function is doing or the how, but they won't tell you why this function is there. Why did we have to build that function? It would be nice to have something like that in there. If you want your code to continue to be maintained, like one of the least things that people care about, especially some engineers care about when it comes to software, is documentation. You have to document your code. If you don't want people to ruin your code, if you don't want people to take your software in a different direction, document your code. The more pleasant the experience is with your software, the more likely people to want to work with you and to want to contribute to your software and want to build that software with you. So you have clean code, but it's also documented code that tells you what it's doing. And don't take that to an extreme. Like, there are methods that are so small in a smaller microservice that doesn't really require any documentation at all. There are things that are very, very simple. We're talking about a complex, maybe monolithic application, or AI based, or if you're writing an application for a group of people that are not familiar with the patterns that you're following, yeah, that would be a good idea. But it's not always a reason to write documentation or write comments on your methods. The one last thing is documentation outside of your code that's on your GitHub repo or whatever source control you're using. The setup, the things they need to do to set up the project on their computer so they can get up and running. Like your ideal situation here is to have someone just newly hired and then sit them on their new machine and have them clone your code and see how long it takes for them to be able to run that code fully and be able to develop it. And the longer it takes them, the more confused they are, the more you will get to understand that your code isn't really plug and play. It's not really that well documented, and you need to improve on that. This is where you get to take advantage and learn from people that are new to the organization, are new to your team. You get to learn from them and take advantage of that opportunity, that there's a new mindset in the team, a new perspective that will tell you, why your code is confusing and why your code doesn't make sense, especially if they're inexperienced, like interns or just new graduates and whatnot. They're inexperienced, so there are things that are not pretty straightforward. They will be your measure. They will be your guidance to tell you whether your code makes sense or not, whether your code is easy to understand or not. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to type in the comment section or send me a message. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in another video. Thank you for watching.